Recently, the Trump administration effectively dismantled the USAID, putting the remaining staff on administrative leave. Now, you can find stories about this instance and the politics behind it or Elon Musk's involvement everywhere, but this issue is still far from over as it navigates its way through the courts. So instead of the politics, I wanted to instead focus on the health effects USAID had on the world and what the removal of that agency will mean moving forward. USAID provided HIV treatment for 20 million across the globe, delivered malaria treatment and prevention measures, and led mine-clearing efforts in places like Cambodia and Vietnam, where active, unexploded World War II mines are still present. USAID was critical in providing conservation efforts to the Brazilian Amazon and humanitarian aid to almost 3 million Venezuelans. The USAID also had a large initiative in Brazil focused on improving indigenous people's livelihoods. In Sudan, where a civil war has devastated the area, USAID provided aid to combat cholera, malaria, and measles for over 600,000 Sudanese. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but I've barely scratched the surface. I haven't mentioned their water security efforts in Jordan and Kenya, aid for vulnerable women in Afghanistan, funding for heating and schools in war-torn Ukraine, and aid efforts in Colombia. Overall, according to U.S. officials, the U.S. funded around 47% of humanitarian aid through USAID. USAID was allocated close to $38 billion at the most recent count, and that was an extremely cost-effective way for America to garner goodwill from the international community. But for now, it's gone, with replacement programs most likely coming from countries like China and Russia. 47% of the world's humanitarian efforts suddenly disappearing will cause a massive amount of ramifications that we can only guess at. The Trump administration has said that it issued funding waivers for all programs involving life-saving humanitarian aid and food assistance. But a USAID employee told CNN that, quote, "The waiver is 100% meaningless to us. We're not processing any of these payments, so the waiver itself is largely meaningless if you can't get paid." Now, oversight of federal spending is important, but if we look at it empathetically, it makes sense to help those in need when we have the ability.